Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature and background from Baldur's Gate in no particular order, so let's get to it. As you see, today our commander is Lozhan, Dragon's Legacy. As with my OG deck, linked in the video's description, Lozhan was created specifically for this set. The designers conceived of her as an aberrant mind sorcerer, which is a spellcaster whose innate magical talent comes from the influence of some strange alien powers. From her flavor text, it seems like she channels the psionic weight of stories and legends into pure magical energy and crushes her foes with it. Which is, in all honesty, a very D&D way to just hit someone with a book. Please trust me when I say I've seen worse character backstories. I'm excited to show you what I put together for Lozhan, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a great card and why I thought it deserved a deck to be built around. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, sometimes I'm even a little tricky with it, like I am today. And I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander. Lozhan Dragon's Legacy is a 4/2 legendary dragon shaman for 3 blue and a red. She flies and has, whenever we cast an adventure or dragon spell, Lozhan deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target that isn't a commander. Wait. You're saying that our dragon commander cares about dragon spells and we get to burn any target when we cast them? Free direct damage in our command zone? And the same thing happens when we cast adventures? In a set full of dragons with adventures on them? I mean, sign me up. Listen, Lozhan is a cool character, but really, we're here to play Is It Dragons? Did you know that most dragons are what's known as very good? It's true. They're big, they fly, and some of them breathe fire. I don't think I need to say any more, but oh, I will. The goal of our deck is to ramp out as many sweet dragons as possible while using our commander's triggered ability to send damage, well, wherever we need it. Usually, we want to send it at potential blockers that have flying or reach to keep the skies clear for our attacks. But we can also go after other creatures that generate value or pose a threat to us on the ground. The only ones we can't burn with Lozhan are commanders, but that's a good thing. If we spent our triggers to force our opponents to continually have to replay their commanders, they probably wouldn't let us keep playing this deck with them. So we'll stick to incinerating creatures, planeswalkers, and maybe even the odd battle. Stay tuned for that one. And if none of those strike our fancy, the old adage remains true: face is the place. Since we're so invested in dragons, we have a number of Typal synergies to help us out. Cards that make our dragons bigger, cards that draw us more cards based on the dragons we have, cards that give us extra burn to complement Lozhan's trigger, and especially cards that give us more dragons in the form of tokens. We have some fun, splashy inclusions because, come on, this is a dragons deck. It won't be the last one in this series of Baldur's Gate decks, but I figured we'd hit the ground running, and Lozhan does that in style. We have other ways to generate value as well. Since we're doing direct damage almost every turn, we have ways to draw cards or gain life or make treasures from it. Since we're repeatedly impacting the board with our commander's triggers, we have some ways of double dipping on what those triggers give us. And since our commander is all about the tales of grand journeys and enthralling quests, we have a handful of adventure cards to add to our avalanche of draconic doom, meaning about 40 of our spells translate into a breath weapon we could point across the table. I can just picture Lozhan reading people's minds, extracting anecdotes and experiences to weave them into dangerous yarns and lethal sagas, and finding each tale to be less thrilling than she'd hope. I mean, not everyone can be a dragon. The fire in her belly makes her want to spice up the details, so when she sends her mental magical might back at her enemies, they burn as much from the shame of her critique as from the physical flames. And since they die before they can confer with each other, none of them realize she always gives the same note. Cool story, but maybe add some dragons? You'll enjoy this deck if you like seeing an iconic Kindred strategy do what it does best while having direct damage as a backup for your creature-focused game plan, or if you're the type where if someone asked you to tell them what you like most about the fantasy genre, you'd consider the word dragons to be a complete answer. So, as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section, filled with cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which didn't make the cut for me. A lot of that is because dragons are expensive, and I wanted a more reasonable mana curve. That's how it goes. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you're interested in what I've done and you want to go harder into it, or if you like what I've built and you want to use it as a jumping off point, that considering section is a great place to gain inspiration when you build your own Lozhan Dragon's Legacy deck. So let's begin. We're going to start with the most important section of our deck, which of course is our dragons. These are all cards that one way or another are dragon spells, so we'll trigger Lozhan. Yeah, we'll be able to see the adventures in a little bit. We're going to start with a little bit of an interesting one, which is the Evasion of Tarkir. This is 1 and a red for a 5 defense siege. Now, if you've never seen battles before, the way this works is you pay 1 and a red, it's a permanent spell, it enters, and as it enters, we choose an opponent to protect it. Now, we still control it, but this opponent will protect it. And then, once it enters, we and any other opponent besides the opponent we've chosen to protect it is allowed to attack it, the same way you might attack a planeswalker rather than a player. Similar to that, the protecting opponent can block as though, we were attacking a planeswalker they controlled in order to protect Evasion of Tarkir. Again, they don't control Evasion of Tarkir, they only protect it. And when it takes damage, whether from combat or something like a lightning bolt, or Lozhan, I suppose, it will lose defense counters. These 5 defense counters it comes in with, 1 for every damage that it has. Sort of the way that planeswalkers lose loyalty when they take damage. And then when it loses all of its loyalty counters, we can cast it transformed, and we don't have to pay a mana cost for it because the cost is defeating it. So yeah, we pay 2, it comes in, it does its enters trigger, and then what we try to do is attack it or just burn it out with Lozhan so that we can get the backside of it. But let's see what it all does. For 1 and a red, we get a 5 defense siege that says when it enters, we reveal any number of dragon cards from our hand, and when we do, it deals X plus 2 damage to any other target where X is the number of cards revealed this way. So at the very least, if we don't reveal any cards from our hand, maybe because we don't have any dragons in hand, we still do 2 damage, which is 2 mana at sorcery speed for a shock, which is not ideal, but it's just the beginning of what Evasion of Tarkir can do. But if we had 3 different dragons in hand, then this is a 2 mana sorcery speed effect that does 5 damage to any target. We can even hit commanders with this. The only thing that's restricted for commanders in terms of burn in our deck is Lozhan's triggers herself. So Evasion of Tarkir comes in as a 2 mana way for us to do some direct damage, and then once it's defeated, hopefully with Lozhan's triggers on their own, we get to cast Defiant Thundermaw, which is a 4/4 dragon with flying and trample that says whenever a dragon you control attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target. That dragon deals the damage, not necessarily the Thundermaw dealing all the damage, although it does trigger on itself because it doesn't say whenever another dragon you control attacks. So we take all of our dragons, swing in with them, which is what we want to do with this deck anyway, and each one comes with a free shock that we can send anywhere. That's great. And now I know what you're thinking, but Defiant Thundermaw doesn't have a mana cost, right? So it won't trigger Lozhan on this side since it's not a dragon, and it won't trigger Lozhan on this side, even though it is a dragon, because it doesn't have a mana cost. If only that were true, we would have a reason to be sad. But we don't have a reason to be sad because here are the comprehensive rules telling us exactly what we need to know. The mana value of the back of a non-modal double-faced permanent, or spell's back face, is calculated as though it had the mana cost of its front face. What that means is Defiant Thundermaw has mana value 2, no matter what side of this card it is. If it's the Evasion of Tarkir or the Thundermaw, we are casting the Thundermaw from exile as part of the trigger ability from it being defeated. We exile it and cast it transformed, and when we do, it has the mana value of its front side, which is 2. So it's only 2 damage that we're doing with Lozhan, but still pretty nice to be able to get that just on its own, in addition to all the other fun dragon stuff we're doing with this. And if you're wondering about that rule, at time of recording, that is rule 2023B from the comprehensive rules. In case you have someone in your pod who's like, no, it doesn't have something listed there, so it doesn't have a mana value. No, it just doesn't have a mana cost, but it does have a mana value. Slightly different terms, and therefore rules associated with them. So a fun way to start talking about things in our mono red deck. It's not mono red, I don't know why I said that. Let's keep moving. We've got Magda the Horde Master next. Again, not a dragon. 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary dwarf berserker that says whenever you commit a crime, create a tapped treasure token, but only once each turn. A crime is when we target an opponent, something they control, or something in their graveyard. that something they control could also be a spell on the stack. But we only get it once every turn. However, Magda is a 2-mana 2/2 that gives us treasures essentially every turn, because whenever Lozhan triggers, unless we're sending that damage at our own stuff, we're committing a crime. So we're going to get a treasure each time. It comes in tapped, so we can't use it right away, but that's all right. And Magda says if we sacrifice 3 treasures, if we don't use them for anything, we can make a 4/4 red Scorpion Dragon creature token with flying and haste, but only at sorcery speed. So that does mean we're not casting this dragon, and of course we're casting Magda, but she's not a dragon, so this won't trigger Lozhan. But it does add to our dragon count, and that's pretty sweet for us. We want to be able to have more dragons in play, and if we aren't using Magda's treasures for dragons, we're sure getting a free treasure basically every turn when we cast a dragon, and thereby get a trigger from Lozhan, in order to get eventual dragons, or just ramp us. You know, those treasures can ramp us as well, and that's pretty sweet. Notably, however, Magda says she only triggers once each turn. It doesn't say on each of your turns. So if we have a way to lightning bolt someone on an opponent's turn, that's going to trigger Magda as well. We'll get a tapped treasure that will untap with any other treasures we have that are tapped during our next untap step. Next we have Chaos Dragon, a classic. Just really, it's classic to me because I played a bunch of the Forgotten Realms deck, commander decks, you know, when AFR came out for a while. I really like this card. It's a 4/4 flying haste dragon for just 1 and double red. It has to attack each combat if able, and at the beginning of combat on our turn, each player rolls a d20, and if one or more opponents have the highest result, Chaos Dragon can't attack those players or planeswalkers they control this combat. So the idea here is, if everyone rolls a d20, and somebody rolls a 19, let's say, and it's not us, then we can't attack that player this turn, or any of their planeswalkers. If every one of our opponents rolled a 10, and we rolled below a 10, then the Chaos Dragon can't attack this turn, because it can't attack us anyway, and it can't attack any of the opponents who have the highest result, and all of our opponents are tied for the highest, which is unlikely to happen. But if we're down to a single opponent, and they roll higher than us, or at least they roll equal to us, you know, if they have the highest result, which could be the same as our result, then that means the Chaos Dragon can't attack this turn. However, for 3 mana, a 4/4 flying haste is very good, and if it eventually becomes slightly less good, I bet by that point we have a bunch of other dragons who have joined it, and so we don't have to worry as much. Next up is Furdock Core from the recent, I guess recent in the sense that it was earlier this year, Lorwyn Eclipsed set. So Furdock Core is actually a mana rock. This is a manalith, in fact. It's 3 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. That's a manalith. However, it is a kindred artifact with Shapeshifter, and it has the Changeling ability, which means this card is every creature type. Note, it does not say this artifact is every creature type. It says this card, which means it refers to that ability in every zone. So, when we cast Furdock Core, Changeling applies when we're casting it, so we are casting a dragon spell. Remember, Lozhan does not say whenever you cast an adventure spell or a dragon creature spell. She says a dragon spell. So this is a dragon spell on the stack, and so it will trigger Lozhan and let us lightning bolt something that isn't a commander. Lightning bolt, of course, because Furdock Core is mana value 3. So this is pretty good. It's a mana rock, it's a manalith that lets us trigger our commander and helps out with our dragon's count or anything else that triggers off of dragons. And we can pay 4 generic mana, and it becomes a 4/4 artifact creature until end of turn, which is to say, it will be a dragon, so it still counts for our dragon count, or our dragon creature count, or any of our effects that care about power 4 or greater, any of these things. Nice to be able to have this be something we can animate into a dragon if we need to, but at the very least, we have several manaliths in this deck, simply because there's a bunch of good ones for dragons, and this is a solid one that also triggers our commander. Next up, we have Fire Spitter Whelp from Foundations. I've got the Foundations Jumpstart printing here, but originally from actual Foundations. This is 2 and a red for a 2/2 dragon with flying, so it's a Wind Drake, that says whenever you cast a non-creature or a dragon spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So a little bit of extra burn for us that we get to send around for any of our dragons that get cast, as well as all of our non-creature spells. So that's pretty good. Next is Lozhan, Cultist of Tiamat, and I'm just going to mention this here. In these Baldur's Gate deck videos, I mentioned early on we're going to have more dragons ones because there's a theme of dragons in a Dungeons & Dragons set. Yeah, I haven't yet released my Lozhan deck, and you're going to see some other legendary Baldur's Gate commanders in this deck as well, some of which I haven't released yet. But you will eventually, and in this video's description, you're going to see a link to my playlist of all of the decks that I've released so far. Or if you're watching this, after late 2027, I should have all of them done. So if you want to check out Lozhan, and Lozhan is already released, that playlist is a great place to look for it. Anyway, this is 2 and a red for a 1/3 legendary dragon shaman that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is that spell's mana value. And Lozhan has choose a background, which is not relevant in this deck. So every time we cast a non-creature spell, one of our creatures gets bigger. That seems pretty good. So this is a nice 3-mana dragon that can give us some sweet pump since we're trying to attack in the air. We're not really a deck that is focused on non-creature spells, but what the heck, it helps us out. We've got plenty of spells that are non-creatures, and so we're able to get some value from Lozhan in the process. Next we have Patron of the Arts, a 3/1 Dragon Noble, looking great, with for 2 and a red, with the ability, whenever it enters or dies, we make a treasure token. So sure, it's not like it's going to do a whole lot for us, but it does get us to Lightning Bolt something, since it's a 3-mana value creature, if Lozhan is in play. And it comes in, ramps us. If it dies, it ramps us, and it's a blade, a 3/1, so that's pretty good for us too. Next we have Swashbuckler Extraordinaire, 2 and a red for a 2/2 Dragon Rogue Warrior that when it enters makes us a treasure token. Good. So it's almost like we're getting to cast it as a 2-mana 2/2 because it refunds us for that treasure, but it still counts as 3 mana value for Lozhan. And whenever we attack, it doesn't say with the Swashbuckler, just whenever we attack at all, we may sacrifice 1 or more treasures, and when we do, up to that many target creatures gain double strike until end of turn. So we have a small amount of treasure creation in this deck, and being able to use that as a way to pump up one of our creatures in the sense of giving it double strike can be pretty powerful, especially if we have an unblocked flyer, or a flyer that's not going to be blocked because, it flies. So that when we attack with it, we know we can give it double strike at the cost of a single mana in the form of a treasure. Pretty good. Next up, we have Torian Mauler. This is another card, I think the only other card in the deck, that has Changeling. It's a 2/2 for 2 and a red. It's a shapeshifter with Changeling, so it looks like a bull, but it's everything, which means it's a dragon, and on the stack, it's a dragon spell. And it says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may put a 1/1 counter on this creature. It only triggers on opponent's turns, but it triggers on every spell they cast, not just, when they cast a creature spell, a non-creature spell, when they cast a spell during their turn. Anytime they cast any spell, the Torian Mauler gets bigger. This is I like to think of it as a smaller version of Forgotten Ancient, Mr. Baby Cakes, which is quite powerful, but it's also in green and it costs 1 more. So yeah, Torian Mauler is helping us out as another changeling for us. Next we have Atsushi the Blazing Sky. This is 2 and double red for a 4/4 flying trampling legendary dragon spirit that says when Atsushi dies, we exile the top 2 cards of our library, and until at the end of our next turn we may play them, or we make 3 treasure tokens. Oftentimes those treasures are going to do more for us, but if it's later in the game and we need the card advantage, getting it this way is not a bad idea. Besides, a 4/4 flying trampler for 4 is pretty great. Next up, we have Nimbleclaw Adept. This is 3 and a blue for a 2/3 Dragon Wizard, Dragonborn, just like I believe Lozhan is, with an ability called Bigby's Hand. If we tap the Adept, we can untap we can untap 2 other target permanents, but only as a sorcery and only once each turn. So what that means is we can take our 2 best creatures, attack with them, then tap down the Adept and untap them, and it's almost like they had Vigilance. Or we can tap the Nimbleclaw Adept and untap 2 of our lands that we tapped for mana, which means this is essentially tapping for 2 mana of any color that our lands could produce every turn, and that's pretty sweet. We can use this for other ways. Of course, we can do the same land trick with any of our mana rocks if we wanted to. Maybe our Furdok Core, we want to tap for mana and then use that mana to animate it. We could do that with the Nimbleclaw Adept, tapping it for mana, tapping the Adept to untap the core, and so forth. This can do a lot for us, and it's just useful in so many ways, so might as well. Next is Parapet Thrasher from the Tarkir Dragonstorm Commander decks. This is 2 and double red for a 4/3 flying dragon that says whenever one or more dragons we control deal combat damage to an opponent, we choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Which means in order to get multiple modes, because it's one or more dragons, we have to have at least one dragon hit more than one opponent. For each opponent, we get to choose a different mode, as long as each opponent got hit with at least one dragon, and that dragon dealt combat damage to them. So our modes, at the very least, we're going to get one of these most every turn, are Destroy Target Artifact that an opponent controls. Parapet Thrasher deals 4 damage to each other opponent, so it may not have even been the Parapet Thrasher that did damage to the opponent that we hit, but we're going to get it to do 4 damage to each other opponent. That's pretty good. That's 8 damage if we've got 3 opponents. And we exile the top card of our library, and we may play it this turn. So a little bit of Impulse Draw, similar to Atsushi, but it's until end of this turn, not until the end of our next turn. But at least it says play rather than cast, so we are able to play a land from exile if we haven't already made our land drop that turn. Yeah. Next we have Renari, Merchant of Marvels, another Baldur's Gate one. 3 and a blue for a 2/4 legendary dragon artificer that lets us cast dragon spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. And Renari has Choose a Background, which you'll see in the Renari deck that's coming out. At present, though, this is just a 2/4 dragon that will let Lozhan hit something that isn't a commander for 4 damage, and from that point on, we cast all our dragons and artifacts on other players' turns. Unless we're casting a dragon that has haste, or, a mana rock that we want to use right away, there's no reason for us to not hold up our mana and surprise our opponents with huge draconic blockers or sudden infusions of mana or other effective artifacts that we may have. Neat. Next up is Stirring Bard. Ooh, this is 3 and a red for a 0/4 Dragon Bard with Defender. So we're getting to do 4 damage with Lozhan, but we've got an 0/4 Defender. We basically got a wall here. And it says, when this creature enters, you take the initiative. We'll talk about that in a moment. It also has a Mantle of Inspiration, which is tap, and target creature gains menace and haste until end of turn. Pretty nice to be able to have an 0/4 that we can block with, and if we don't want to be on the defensive, we can be on the offensive by having one of our big creatures enter, and it suddenly has haste and can attack, and also has menace, so it's harder to block. So, offensive, defensive, we can do it both with the Bard, because Bards can do anything. And you take the initiative, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look. The initiative is a mechanic in Baldur's Gate that is similar to a much more complicated version of the Monarchy. The initiative is a status that a player has and that some player will have for the rest of the game once a player first gets it. And whenever one or more creatures a player controls deal combat damage to someone with the initiative, that player will take the initiative. So the way to have the initiative is either to play a card that says you take the initiative, or to do combat damage to whichever player has the initiative, and then suddenly you will take the initiative. So that makes sense. The initiative gets passed around at the table, which is great. It encourages players to attack each other, and so it keeps the game moving. But what does the initiative actually give you? Well, whenever you take the initiative, whether you took it because you played Stirring Bard, or because you attacked someone else who had the initiative and then you take it. Whenever you take the initiative, and if you kept the initiative until your next turn, at the beginning of your upkeep, you get a trigger to venture into the Undercity. So either you take the initiative and you'll venture by playing a card, you take the initiative by attacking someone who has the initiative, doing combat damage to them, and you take it then, so you venture. Or you keep the initiative until the beginning of your upkeep, and at that point you get a trigger and you get to venture. What venturing into the Undercity is you have this nice dungeon. You put a little marker on the first room when you first venture into the Undercity, and you get its effect. The secret entrance's effect is Lay of the Land. We search our library for a basic, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. I thought it was Rampant Growth for a moment. No, it's just essentially drawing us a basic land from our deck, which is pretty good. Then, every time we continue to venture into the Undercity, we move our marker through this little dungeon. We can only go down. We can only go down to rooms on the next level that are connected to the room we're in. We can't go laterally, and we can't go backwards. And once we complete the last one, the next time we would venture into the Undercity, we just start back at the top again and get that again. So oftentimes in this deck, it's pretty good to be able to go to the secret entrance and then go to the Lost Well and scry 2, because that lets us set up our next couple of turns, and then to the stash and make a treasure because our deck is a little mana hungry because we've got a bunch of dragons in it. However, if we want to protect ourselves, we can always goad a target opponent, Or we can go the other way with it. We can make our commander or one of our smaller creatures bigger. We can have a player lose 5 life. We can draw a card, make ourselves a skeleton, and Throne of the Dead 3 lets us reveal the top 10 cards of our library, put a creature from among them onto the battlefield with 3/1/1 counters on it, and it gains hexproof until our next turn, and then we shuffle, which includes those 10 cards we revealed. So this lets us find a creature, make it huge, protect it until next turn. All seems pretty good. But at the very least, Stirring Bard is going to find us a basic land, so it's drawing us a card when it enters. That seems pretty good to me. Yeah, that was our Stirring Bard. Great. Next up is Thunderbreak Regent. This is 2 and double red for a 4/4 flyer that's a dragon. Another 4/4 flyer for 4, that's pretty good. That says whenever a dragon you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, this creature deals 3 damage to that player. So it's not quite the same as the original templating of Terror of the Peaks, because it's sort of shared, and it's not quite the same as Ward pay 3 life. But in practice, it sort of works that way. As long as Thunderbreak Regent is in play, all of our dragons are going to be protected a little bit. Our opponent, if they try to target them with a spell or ability, that opponent's going to get lightning bolted by the Thunderbreak Regent. Again, it's not the same as paying life, because maybe they have something that protects them from damage, or just gives them protection from red, or gives them hexproof. Hexproof actually doesn't matter because the Regent doesn't target. So yeah, this is a pretty sweet way of protecting our creatures, or just passing around a little bit of extra damage, but in addition, it's a 4/4 for 4 that flies. Next up, we have Thundermane Dragon. 3 and a red for a 4/4 flying dragon, another great rate, that says you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may cast creature spells with power 4 or greater from the top of your library. If you cast a creature spell this way, it gains haste until end of turn. So, how many spells do we have that will apply to this? Power of greater than 3? We've got 20 different cards in the deck that are that. One of them is the Thunderbane Dragon, so that means we're able to cast 19 other spells in our library when this is in play from the top of our library. Pretty great. Yeah, sounds good to me. A little bit of card advantage. Next up, we have Vengeful Ancestor. I'm using the Dragonstorm printing of it, but it actually comes from the AFR commander decks, the Forgotten Realm Commander. So, and it was reprinted in CLB as well, so that's cool. Anyway, this is 2 and double red for a 3/4 Spirit Dragon with flying, and that says whenever this creature enters or attacks, goad target creature. Meaning, that creature, until our next turn, has to attack if it's able to, and has to attack a player other than us if it's able to. That means its controller can't send it at a planeswalker or a battle, even if those are controlled or protected by someone other than us. It has to go at a player other than us if it's able to. Now, if we go to creature and we're the only player in the game other than that creature's controller, then yes, it has to attack, and it has to attack us. But if it's able to, it'll go at someone besides us, which means most of the time, goading is a way of not just getting damage done to our opponents and forcing the creature doing the damage to end up tapped at the end of that turn, unless of course it has vigilance, but it also protects us from that creature because that creature is going to be attacking and not us. Pretty good. And Vengeful Ancestor says, whenever a goaded creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to its controller. So that's pretty neat. It's really fun to see interactions with this, because maybe that creature has Infect, which means its controller is going to gain a poison counter. The other thing to know about it is, if the creature we goad has lifelink, it's going to do damage to its controller, and its controller is going to gain life equal to that damage done, so the damage will be dealt technically, and the life will be gained technically, but the life total just won't change. So it's something to think about when we're goading things. But yeah, this can protect us when this enters and when it attacks, and send some damage otherwise around the table, which seems pretty fun. Imagine goading a Galta player's commander. Next, we have Dragon Cultist. This is a background, 4 and a red, for a legendary enchantment background that gives our commander the ability, at the beginning of our end step, if a source we control dealt 5 or more damage this turn, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. So we get to make dragons. Again, this is making dragon tokens. It's not going to be triggering our commander and her ability. But as long as our commander dealt 5 or more damage, which means we cast at least 5 total mana value of dragons and or adventures that turn. So in a way, it's if we expended 5, then we get a free dragon at the end step. That seems pretty great. Notably, however, Dragon Cultist only functions when Lozhan is in play because it doesn't have this ability. It grants the ability to our commander. That's how all backgrounds work. Next up, we have Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. 3 and double red for a 5/5 legendary bird dragon, because it's from Bloomborough, with flying. That says whenever Dragonhawk enters or attacks, we exile the top number of cards of our library equal to the number of creatures we control, power 4 or greater, which isn't just that 20 creatures that we saw a little bit ago, because we have ways to pump up our creatures. This is not about things with base power 4, it's just power 4. But notably, if there's no other creatures that have that on play, at least Dragonhawk has it. So it enters or attacks, we exile the top X, where X is the number of creatures we control with power 4 or greater, and we may play those cards until our next end step, so basically for the rest of the turn. And then at the beginning of our next end step, we deal 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. So that means we cannot play them during our end step, we have to play them prior to our end step. And at our end step, they're going to stay in exile, but they're all going to essentially become a shock to each opponent's face. Pretty good. Next up is Ganix Astral Hunter, another Baldur's Gate choose a background commander. This is 4 and a red for a 3/4 legendary dragon with flying that says whenever Ganix or another dragon we control enters, make a treasure. So this is a great way for us to use our treasures for the other cards that we've seen that care about treasures, like Magda. But also, it just gives us a rebate on every dragon we play after Ganix, including Ganix itself. Notably, it does not say whenever Ganix or another dragon creature you control. So Furdok Core will enter and we'll get a treasure off of it, since it is a dragon. Neat. Next up is Imrith, Desert Doom. This is from AFR, 3 and double blue for a 5/5 flying legendary dragon. That was the best card to open in Pack 1 to get you into blue during that draft. Imrith has Ward 4 as long as it's untapped, and whenever Imrith deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card, and then if we have fewer than 3 cards in hand, we draw cards equal to the difference. So the idea here being, if we have 0 cards in hand or 1 card, when Imrith deals combat damage to a player, we will draw and then draw more. Because if we had 1 card in hand, that first one's going to put us at 2, and now we need to go up to 3, so we draw 1 more. If we had no cards in hand, Imrith basically says, when it does combat damage to a player, Ancestral Recall. That seems pretty great. And also on a 5 mana 5/5 flyer with Ward when it's not tapped. Next up, we have Scourge of Valkas. 2 and triple red for a 4/4 flying dragon that says whenever it or another dragon we control enters, the whatever dragon has entered deals damage equal to the number of dragons we control to any target. So if Scourge of Valkas comes in and we don't have any other dragons, it's going to deal 1 damage to any target. And then if our commander enters, Scourge of Valkas is going to trigger, and our commander is going to do 2 damage to any target. And it's just going to keep going up from there. And Scourge of Valkas has Fire Breathing, just a classic ability. A single red to give it +1/+0 until end of turn. Love it. Next is Wrathful Red Dragon, a card that is worth a couple of dollars, but I don't know what it is. I've opened some Baldur's Gate and I have what feels like an unlimited number of this card. This is just like my most opened rare in the set. And it's good. It's 3 and double red for a 5/5 dragon with flying that says whenever a dragon you control is dealt damage, that dragon deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. So we get to take out our wrath on something. If somebody decides to block one of our dragons, however much damage they do to that dragon, even if that damage is in excess of our dragon's toughness, we're going to get to do that same amount of damage to any other non-dragon target. However, if we block, let's say with Wrathful Red Dragon, Galta, which is a 12/12 trampler, Galta is probably only assigning 5 damage to the dragon, so that's the only amount of damage being dealt to the dragon, so we're only going to be able to redirect, or not redirect, but also do that damage as well. But Wrathful Red Dragon doesn't have to survive, and no dragon does, to get this trigger. So yeah. Next up is Young Blue Dragon. 4 and a blue for a dragon with flying. It's a 3/3. Not very exciting. That's okay. because it has an adventure. So if you haven't seen adventures before, then you've probably been confused when I've been talking about adventures during this video. What they are is an extra spell that's sort of stapled to this dragon card, and it gives us the option while it's in our hand to either summon the dragon or send the dragon on an adventure first and then summon the dragon back from the adventure. The way this works is when it's in our hand, we can either cast Young Blue Dragon for 4 and a blue and we get a 3/3 flyer, and we just ignore the adventure, or we can cast this sorcery adventure called Sand Augury, 1 and a blue to scry 1 and draw a card, which is opt. And then, as part of casting an adventure, we exile this card and we can cast the creature half of it from exile later. It doesn't even have to be on a later turn. We can do it that same turn if we still have enough mana to do so. So either we can cast the adventure first and then the dragon, or we can just cast the dragon. The only way, once the dragon is in play, for us to cast the adventure is by bouncing the card to our hand. So either adventure first, then dragon, or just dragon. That's how adventures work. But what's nice about this card is it shows that we can double dip with our commander's triggers. We cast Sand Augury, we cast an adventure, we're doing 2 damage to something that's not a commander. Then we cast Young Blue Dragon, we cast a dragon, we're doing 5 damage to something that's not a commander. So a total of 7 damage over the course of 2 castings from our commander. Pretty good. Next up is Hammerhead Tyrant. 4 and double blue for a 6/6 flying dragon that says whenever we cast a spell, we return up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to that spell's mana value to its owner's hand. So every time we cast any of our spells, doesn't say dragons, any spell, we get to bounce a creature, we get to bounce a non-land permanent we don't control, as long as that permanent has lesser mana value or equal mana value to whatever spell we cast. So all of our spells become removal spells. Pretty great for a 6 mana 6/6 flyer. In addition, this is going to do 6 damage to something that isn't a commander thanks to Lozhan. Or rather, Lozhan's going to do the damage, but we're going to get that damage done either way. Next we have Lathless. Lathless Dragon Queen is so cool. Is she originally from Core 19? Looks like she is, yeah. Core 19 was the first core set after my very long break from Magic that I got to play, and I saw her and I was like, what? Look at this big dragon! Look at it loving dragons! She's the queen of dragons! Just really cool. I don't know, I just like it. Lathless is 4 and double red for a 6/6 flying legendary dragon that says whenever another non-token dragon we control enters, we make a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. And Lathless, we can pay 1 and a red to give all of our dragons +1/+0 until end of turn. So Lathless, super fire breathing, affects all of our dragons, but more importantly, feeds us more and more dragons as we play more dragons. She wants us to play dragons, she's going to give us more dragons when we do. Those dragons are tokens, so we're not casting them, so we're not getting a trigger from Lozhan, but it sure is nice to get a 6 damage trigger from Lozhan when Lathless comes in, and then every other dragon we get doesn't just trigger Lozhan, also triggers Lathless, and we get more dragons. Love it. Next up is Niv Mizzet Visionary. This is the only Niv Mizzet in the deck. Don't get excited. This is the one from Foundations. This is a 5/5 legendary dragon wizard with flying for 4, a blue, and a red that gives us no maximum hand size, and whenever a source we control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, we draw that many cards. Which means if Lozhan is in play when Niv Mizzet is cast, Lozhan's going to do 6 damage to someone. Then, or something, either. Then, with Niv and Lozhan in play, let's say we play Lathless. Lathless is 6 mana value, which means Lozhan is going to see that, is going to do 6 damage to something, and if that something is an opponent, Niv Mizzet's going to see us do non-combat damage to an opponent and draw 6 cards. So Niv turns our Lozhan triggers, as long as we go face with them, into bursts of card draw. Awesome. And we don't have a maximum hand size, so we don't have to worry about losing out on those cards. Neat. Next is just Red Dragon from AFR. 4 and double red for a 4/4 dragon with flying that does 4 damage to each opponent when it enters. That is 1/10 of each player's starting life total. Just a free 10% off every opponent's life total when this enters, and then it's a 4/4 flyer. Seems okay to me. Next up, we have Ryusei, the Falling Star. This is 5 and a red for a 5/5 legendary dragon spirit with flying that when Ryusei dies, it deals 5 damage to each creature without flying. So this, I think, is our only Wrath in the deck. It's just a way to make sure we hit everything that's not one of our things. We have a few creatures that aren't dragons or just don't fly, so they can get hit with Ryusei, but having this sort of retributive effect is really great. It makes it so Ryusei doesn't necessarily have an evasive ability beyond flying, but it means that no one's going to kill Ryusei unless they want to lose probably their whole board, or at least most of it. At least their I would say small stuff, but their medium stuff too is still going to die to 5 damage. So yeah, a pretty nice Wrath effect built into a dragon. Next up is, the memes. It's Stormscale Scion, 4 and double red for a 4/4 flying dragon from Tarkir Dragonstorm that says, other dragons you control get +1/+1. And it has Storm. Which means whenever we cast this, we make a copy of it for every spell that was cast before this. It doesn't say spell that we cast before this. Every spell that was cast before this gives us an extra dragon. So if we cast a single mana spell before we cast this, then we go to combat and attack, and our opponents cast a Path to Exile and get rid of one of our creatures. That's a shame. Second main phase, we cast Stormscale Scion. 2 spells were cast prior to this during this turn, our 1 mana spell and their Path to Exile. So we make 2 copies of Stormscale Scion on the stack. The copies resolve first, and then the third one comes in, and now we have 3 6/6 dragons, because each of them is getting +1/+1 from the other 2. And all of them are giving +1/+1 to all of our other dragons, so each other dragon we have that isn't one of our Stormscale Scions is getting +3/+3. Just getting 2 of these is incredible value for 6 mana. But sometimes you can get 3 or even more of them, and your whole team becomes enormous. It's just a lot of fun. Next up, we have Drakoseth, Maw of Flames, 4 and triple red for a 7/7 legendary dragon with flying. I love Drakoseth. I'm so glad they put him in Foundations. Or her, not really sure. That says whenever Drakoseth attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. When Drakoseth attacks, Drakoseth does 10 damage. 4 damage to one target, 3 to another, and another 3 to a third. So that could be 4 damage to the opponent we're attacking, so that if Drakoseth isn't blocked, that opponent's taking a total of 11 damage, and then a lightning bolt to the face for both of our other 2 opponents. This could kill 3 different creatures, perhaps, and Drakoseth still attacks in for 7. This is just a huge amount of damage, fire everywhere, incredible, incredible art. Just love the vibes of this card. Finally in this section, it's another adventure creature. It's Sword Coast Serpent. This is a serpent dragon. Serpents in Magic are sea serpents, not snakes so much. Those are snakes. This is 5 and double blue for a 6/6 serpent dragon. It's not a flyer, but luckily it's not going to die from Ryusei's death trigger because it's got 6 toughness. And it says this creature can't be blocked as long as we've cast a non-creature spell this turn. We have plenty of non-creature spells, so that seems good. It also has an adventure called Capsizing Wave, which is an instant, so we can cast it and get a Lozhan trigger on our opponent's turn as well. 1 and a blue for an instant that says return target creature to its owner's hand, so it's just an unsummon. So a removal spell that also could be a second removal effect thanks to the 2 mana that we're getting, or the 2 damage we're getting from Lozhan from that trigger. That's pretty good. And then this is a 7 mana dragon, so 7 more damage that we're sending somewhere, maybe just to an opponent's face. And then all we have to do is cast any non-creature spell when this is untapped, or if this has haste, and we can attack with it unblockably. Even better is if we somehow have 9 mana and a way to make this unblockable, or a way to give this haste, like the Carnelian Dragon Orb, which we'll see later, which means that we can cast Capsizing Wave, and then the Sword Coast Serpent, and that means we've cast a non-creature spell this turn, which was Capsizing Wave, so this comes in, and if it has haste, we can attack with it right away. And we're likely to do even more damage because we probably removed a blocker. Great. That is our dragons section. But I want to go over some of them again by going to our Typal section. These are all cards that care about our dragon creatures and casting dragon spells. So for example, Dragon Tempest. This is 1 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control with flying enters, it gains haste until end of turn. So this is not going to affect that Sword Coast Serpent since it doesn't have flying, but it does affect most of our dragons. Maybe all of our other dragons? Not sure. but specifically it says a creature, not a non-token creature. So any of our Lathless triggers, any of our Magda, I guess the Magda ones already have haste, but yeah, let's say Lathless or Dragon Cultist. Dragon Cultist doesn't matter because they come in the end step. You understand, any of our Lathless triggers, if we have Lathless in play, we play a dragon, we get a 5/5 red dragon token, Dragon Tempest will trigger and it will give that token haste. Seems good, as will the dragon that we cast that triggered Lathless. And whenever a dragon we control enters, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of dragons we control. So similar to one of those dragons we already saw, but this is just a very powerful way to get a bunch of additional burn that rewards us for dragons, and all of our dragons have haste, or almost all of them, all of our flyers have haste, so that's almost like a burn as well. If we're able to attack and, since they're flying, they may be evading any kind of blockers. If someone doesn't have any flying or reach blockers, our creatures our flyers are unblockable to them. So it's like we're getting free damage upstairs anyway. Cool, for 2 mana. Yeah, pretty neat. Next we have Invasion of Tarkir. As you've seen, it cares about dragons on both sides. Molten Exhale is another Dragonstorm card. This is 1 and a red for a sorcery that says you may cast the spell as though it had flash if you behold a dragon as an additional cost. We talked about Behold briefly a little bit ago, I think. Beholding a dragon means either revealing one from your hand or just pointing to one you have in play. If you have a dragon in play, you can choose it. Doesn't do anything to choose it, it just means you have beheld it. Or you can reveal a dragon card from your hand, notably dragon card, not creature, so Fur.Core counts. And that means we can cast Molten Exhale as a 2 mana instant, essentially, since we're casting it at flash speed. And it does 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Can't go face, but it is a good removal spell. Counts on our dragons. Roiling Dragonstorm is next. I love these cards from Tarkir Dragonstorm. It's 1 and a blue for an enchantment that says when it enters, we draw 2 and discard 1. That's great. Draw 2, discard 1 is solid card advantage and selection. For 2 mana, we essentially are up a card, and we've gotten rid of whichever card was in our hand after drawing the 2 that we liked least. Seems good. And when it says, when a dragon we control enters, we return the Dragonstorm to our hand. So we get to cast it again and again and again. This is sort of like having a spell that we're able to return from the graveyard to recast, but it also sits in play, acting as, an additional permanent that we may care about. If we, this is not really a thing our deck does, but if we cared about, Devotion to Blue, it's that doing that as well. Yeah, pretty sweet for us. And it says when a dragon you control enters. So Fur.Core is a dragon spell. It's a dragon permanent because it has Changeling. It doesn't say dragon creature here, so it doesn't have to be a creature to trigger this. Next we have the Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind. I mentioned that a minute ago. 2 and a red for an artifact that taps to add red. And if we use that mana on a dragon, then a dragon creature that is, then that dragon gains haste until end of turn. Pretty solid. Kind of a manalith, doesn't tap for any color, just red, but we're able to make our dragons faster, so yeah, might as well. Next we have another manalith type of card. We got a bunch of these in this section actually. Dragon's Horde is 3 generic mana for an artifact that says when a dragon we control enters, we put a gold counter on Dragon's Horde. The gold counter doesn't have an inherent mechanical meaning, it's just used by this card, because we can tap the Horde and remove a gold counter from it to draw a card, or we can tap the Horde to add a mana of any color. Cool. Rewards us for our dragons, makes us mana. If we don't need its mana, we can turn its gold counters into cards. Next we have Dragon Speaker Shaman. This is 1 and double red for a 2/2 human barbarian shaman that says dragon spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Now, I don't like to put cards in my deck in general that give me mana discounts. The reason is because the math works out to be that if you have a spell or a card that says, dragons you cast cost 1 less to cast, that 1 mana discount is served just as easily by a mana rock of the same cost of the cost reducer as it is by the cost reducer. It also, cost reducers usually reduce by generic mana costs, sort of like this. So if something says it costs 1 generic less to cast, and we have a spell that we need to cast colored mana, and need to spend colored mana on it, that reduction is not helping us. We might as well have a mana rock instead. The math works out to be, unless you have 40 hits in your deck, 40 other cards that can get a discount from your discount effect, it's not usually worth running discount effects over a mana rock or a ramp piece. However, there is a little bit of complication to that math when you have discounts of more than 1 mana. And in a deck that has a bunch of creatures that are expensive, even though some of them have triple colored pips, Dragonspeaker Shaman ends up being pretty nice for us. It can lead to a situation where we're able to double spell and both of those spells are dragons, and in that case we've essentially gotten the equivalent of 4 extra mana in that turn, which is hard to have a mana rock that only costs 3 produce for us. Now that's Magical Christmas Land, but it doesn't happen infrequently in this deck, so yeah, this is, again, not something I usually do with cost reducers, but a cost reducer that works on so many spells, since it does say dragon spells, so that's Verdot Core as well, and also is a multi-mana reduction. I think the intersectionality is pretty good here, so yeah, we go with it. Next we have Dragonstorm Globe. 3 generic mana for an artifact that adds 1 mana of any color, so it's a manalith, and it says each dragon we control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Great! It's like an anthem for our dragons, but those dragons get to keep the anthem if the Dragonstorm Globe goes away. Sure, why not? Next, we've seen our Verdot Core. It cares about dragons because it is a dragon, kind of. Yeah. Fire Spitter Whelp triggers on non-creature spells and dragon spells. Lapis Orb of Dragonkind, which is like the Carnelian Orb, but blue, is 2 and a blue for an artifact that taps for blue, and when we use its mana to cast a dragon creature spell, we scry 2. Sweet. Just have a little mirror to our Carnelian Orb, might as well. Spit Flame is next. I used to play this all the time in M19 Standard. This is really fun. 2 and a red for an instant that does 4 damage to target creature. Only hits creatures, but at instant speed, and it's 3 mana. And whenever a dragon we control enters, we can pay a red and bring Spit Flame back from our graveyard to our hand. Similar to the thing we were doing with our Roiling Dragonstorm, but we're having to pay mana for it, but it's direct damage, so yeah, might as well. Next we have Crucible of Fire, because we are here to play dragons, so we should give all of our dragons +3/+3. 3 and a red for an enchantment that just gives that anthem effect to all of our dragons. That can just kill people. Sometimes we have 3 or 4 dragons in play, we play Crucible of Fire, and we swing, and we win. Sweet. And if we get, like a 1/1 fairy dragon creature token, which you'll see a little bit of later, if we get that into play, what does that do for us? Well, with Crucible of Fire, it's a 4/4. So yeah, actually, we may not have the Fairy Dragon producer in this deck. In any case, we've got a lot of dragon dragon cards. Some of them are not high power and toughness. With Crucible of Fire, they all are. Next, we have Distant Melody. This is 3 and a blue for a sorcery that says choose a creature type and draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. Usually, Distant Melody in a deck like this, as opposed to like an Elves deck or a Merfolk deck or a Humans deck, is not drawing us a billion cards, but getting 3 cards for 4 mana is not terrible, and sometimes we get 5, 6, 7 cards for 4 mana. Pretty good. It's going to help us usually no matter what, and if we're down to just a single creature and we're just desperate for card draw, yeah, I'll pay 4 mana to draw a card. Sometimes you got to. Parapet Thrasher, we've already seen, triggers whenever any of our dragons do combat damage to opponents, 1 or more per opponent. Thunderbreak Regent lets us Lightning Bolt a player if a player targets one of our dragons with a spell or ability. Roiling Dragonstorm, we have not seen yet. This is 4 and a red for an enchantment that says when it enters, we exile cards from the top of our library until we find a non-land card. We can then cast it without paying its mana cost if it doesn't cost more than 8 mana, and otherwise we get to put it in our hand. So no matter what, we're paying 5 mana here, and we're drawing a card or we're casting a card for free. I don't think we have any cards in this deck that cost mana value 8, 9 or greater, so we're going to find a spell and cast it. Unless we don't want to, and we can put it in our hand, because it says we may cast it, we don't have to right away. And Breaching Dragonstorm says when a dragon we control enters, return this to our hand. So this gives us a free spell of some sort, either in hand or on the stack. Every time we cast it, it's 5 mana, but we do have a lot of expensive cards in this deck, and this repeatable way to spend 5 mana and get something good is pretty nice, especially since we can just keep casting dragons and keep putting this back in our hand, especially because this is when a dragon you control enters. So if we have this enter, exile cards down to a dragon, the dragon enters, and this immediately bounces to our hand, so we just paid 5 mana to cascade into a dragon. Pretty good. Next we have Gannix. Ganix cares about any of our dragons entering, making us treasure when they do. Next is Reflections of Lityara from Kaldheim. 4 and a blue. For an enchantment that says, as it enters, we choose a creature type, we will choose dragon, and whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell. So this is not great for our legendaries, for the most part, since the copy will enter and then the original will enter, and we will have to sacrifice one of them, or not sacrifice, but have to legend rule one of them way into the graveyard, usually the token. However, that does mean we have 2 dragons entering play, one after the other, which means any of our triggers that care about dragons entering, like Ganix, which makes us a treasure every time a dragon comes in, is going to trigger off of both of those, even if they are legendaries. And any dragon that's not legendary, which I think we have 10 legends in this deck, something like that. That means all of our other dragon spells, that is, we're going to get an extra copy of. So a token creature, we'll get a second Furdok core if we cast that. I know I keep bringing it up, but it's sort of the weird exception in this deck. So yeah, Reflections of Lityara is an expensive spell, but a powerful one. It's one of my favorite genres of cards and Magic, which is a 5-mana do-nothing enchantment that, when it does things, is very powerful. So yeah, really cool. Next up is Scourge of Valkas. It does damage equal to the number of dragons we control to any target whenever it or any dragon enters. Wrathful Red Dragon. Whenever any of our dragons are dealt damage, we do that much damage to any target that's not a dragon. And Stormscale Scion, well, it gives all of our dragons +1/+1. And so do all of its Storm copies. So that's our Typal section. I do want to check in on our adventures as well. We've seen 2 of them. Young Blue Dragon has the Sand Augury adventure, and Sorco's Serpent has the Capsizing Wave adventure. But we also have Illithid Harvester. This is a card that is so cool, and it is sort of a removal spell and sort of a board wipe both ways. The creature is 4 and a blue for a 4/4 horror with Ceramorphosis. When this creature enters, turn any number of target tapped non-token creatures face down. They are 2/2 horror creatures. What that means is, if an opponent has just attacked on their last turn, and several of their creatures are tapped, any of those creatures that aren't tokens, we can target them with this effect and turn them face down, and now they are 2/2 horrors, and that's all that we know about them. They are face down creatures, so they are defined 100% by this sentence. These 4 words mean that creature no longer has a color, no longer has a mana value, no longer has any abilities. The only thing it has, it doesn't even have a name. It just has a creature type and a power and toughness. It's just a vanilla 2/2 horror. And that's what it'll be for as long as it's on the battlefield. Yeah, that's what it is. Now, when it goes to the graveyard, it will go to the graveyard face up, and so that's relevant if they have something that cares about that. If they have some way to blink those creatures, they will re-enter face up. If they have a way to bounce those creatures and recast them, any of these things, they can get it back. This is just a humble effect. But that humble effect does turn off literally any number of tapped non-token creatures when the Harvester enters. That's pretty good. And it has the Plant Tadpole's Adventure. It's a sorcery for X and double blue that lets us tap X target creatures, and they don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. So, if we say, X equals 4, for 6 mana, we're going to tap down 4 different creatures. We will pass the turn. Those creatures won't untap during their controller's next untap steps. Then on that next turn, we cast the Illithid, and all of those creatures that we tapped, as well as any others that were tapped, are going to be able to be targeted by the Ceramorphosis effect, and we can make them into permanent 2/2 horrors with no other abilities. Neat. Now, notably, anything that's modifying those creatures, like auras or equipment that are equipped to them, counters that are on them, those are still going to stay on them. They don't go away just because we turn the creatures face down. But yeah, it's worth looking at this as a neat removal effect / board wipe in the same way as like Curse of the Swine. So yeah. And we've got Virtue of Knowledge. This is an enchantment that has an adventure. Virtue of Knowledge itself is 4 and a blue for an enchantment that says, if a permanent entering causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is not going to help our commander, because our commander cares about casting spells, not those creatures entering. But we have lots of creatures or lots of effects that do care about our creatures entering, like Ganax, for example. So this is a pretty nice way for us to get some value out of that. And it's a good card that fits in a lot of decks. So if you were to want to upgrade this deck, because there are lots of rad dragons out there that you might just have access to without having to buy them. So if you wanted to build this deck, you could swap out Virtue of Knowledge for more rad dragons or more cool adventures if you want, and that's pretty sweet. And the adventure is Vantress Visions, an instant for 1 and a blue that copies target activated or triggered ability we control and lets us choose new targets for the copy. This can be make a second 5/5 dragon with Latlas with her trigger. This could be make an extra treasure with Ganax. Pretty good. But usually what we're doing with this is we're getting a big benefit from Lozhan. And Lozhan's ability is a triggered ability. So we can use Vantress Visions to make a copy of it. You know, maybe we have a massive dragon coming in. Lozhan is going to trigger and do 6 damage to something. We cast Vantress Visions, and now we're doing 6 damage to something twice, or 6 damage to 2 different things. Great. It seems fun. Those are our adventures, and that kind of covers all of the big parts of our commander's ability and what we have got going on for our game plan. And so, oh, hey, did you just like the video? Great. I appreciate that. That helps me out. Nice. I'm just kidding. You don't have to like the video if you don't feel like it. I just appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining me. Anyway, this is the part where I talk about all the support sections of our deck. So we're going to start, we're going to go to our card advantage section now, which I've tagged as draw, as I always do. Doesn't mean that these all do the draw a card action. They just give us access to more cards. So we're going to start with Curiosity, a classic enchantment. It's a single blue for an aura that enchants a creature and says whenever that creature deals damage to an opponent, we may draw a card. So it does not say combat damage. So Curiosity, if we put it on Lozhan, means every time we cast an instant or dragon spell, we're going to be able to do damage equal to its mana value to any target that isn't a commander, and if we hit an opponent with it, it's going to come with card draw thanks to Curiosity. Then we attack with Lozhan, hit an opponent, we get card draw with Curiosity. So this can give us multiple cards every turn, depending on the spells we're casting, and so it's pretty nice for us to be able to use. And also just 1 mana. That really helps our Stormscale Scion. So Roiling Dragonstorm enters and we draw 2 and discard 1. Dragon's Horde, whenever we have a dragon come in, it gets a gold counter, and we can tap it and remove a gold counter to draw a card. Then we have Frostcliff Siege. This is one of the modal siege cards from Tarkir Dragonstorm. 1, a red, and a blue. For an enchantment that says when it enters, or as it enters, we choose Jeskai or Teamer. If we choose Jeskai, then whenever 1 or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card. That's pretty good. Notably, it says 1 or more creatures, so we're not going to get multiple cards if we do damage with a bunch of creatures to the same player. But it does say a player. So if we send our dragons at multiple players, each player that takes combat damage from our creatures is the number of cards that we draw. If we, send our dragons at 2 different players, and 1 player's hit with 2 dragons and 1 player's hit with 4 dragons, then we've had 1 or more creatures deal combat damage to a player twice, so we'll draw 2 cards. Or, if we choose Teamer instead, then all of our creatures get +1/+0, have Trample, and Haste. Both of these options are pretty great. Usually when I end up putting one of these Dragonstorm Sieges into a deck, there's one option that's clearly better for that deck, but the other one's just, also there. In this deck, it can go either way. If we're looking for more card advantage, which we have a good amount of card advantage in this deck, but if we're looking for more of it, Frostcliff Siege is hard to say no to, since we're going to be doing a lot of card draw, or we're going to be doing a lot of damage, so we're going to be able to draw a lot of cards. However, sometimes our opponents are also playing flyers, so we care about Trample. Sometimes we just need extra damage, so we care about that +1/+0, and we also care about Haste for our dragons. So yeah, Teamer can be good, Jeskai can be good, both are solid for us. Next we've got Seize the Secrets, another crime card. 2 and a blue for a sorcery that draws us 2 cards, so it's just divination, but it costs 1 less if we've committed a crime this turn. So anytime Lozhan does damage to something that we don't control, great, we've committed a crime, so Seize the Secrets is going to be able to be cast for just 2 mana, and it's a 2 mana draw 2. That's pretty good. Next up, we've got Winged Words. Winged Words is kind of a similar deal here. 2 and a blue for a sorcery that draws 2 cards, but it costs 1 less if we control a creature with flying. So yeah, another 2 mana draw 2, as long as we've got any of our flyers in play, seems solid. We've seen Atsushi. Atsushi, we can, when it dies, exile the top 2 and cast or play them until the end of our next turn. Distant Melody lets us draw cards equal to the number of dragons. That's what we're going to choose that we have in play. Parapet Thrasher lets us exile the top card of our library and play it this turn. Every time we have 1 or more dragons, deal combat damage to an opponent if we choose that mode. Stirring Bard lets us take the initiative, which means at the very least it draws us a land, a basic land into our hand. Thunderbane Dragon lets us cast power 4 or greater creatures from the top of our library, and when we do, we gain haste until end of turn. Breaching Dragonstorm finds us the top non-land in our deck and lets us cast it, or put it in our hand. Dragonhawk lets us, when it enters or attacks, exile a bunch of cards off the top of our library, or at least 1, and then we have access to that card until the end of our next end step, to be able to play it. Yeah, there you go. Imrith lets us draw a card when it does combat damage to a player, and then maybe draws us extra cards if we didn't have many in our hand to start. Young Blue Dragon's Adventure, Sand Augury, lets us scry 1 and draw a card, and Niv Mizzet, much like with our Curiosity trick that we're doing, Niv lets us draw cards equal to the amount of non-combat damage we do to any opponent when we do that damage. So that is our card advantage section. Let's go now to our acceleration section, which as usual I've tagged as ramp. Soul Ring is first. It's a single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. Don't need to say anything else about it. It's an incredibly powerful card. It goes in almost every deck. It should go in yours. Next is Wayfarer's Bauble. A single generic mana gives us an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we get to Rampant Growth. Search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So I don't think Wayfarer's Bauble is underplayed in Commander. I just think it's very good. Like, if you're not running a green deck, you should have access to a Rampant Growth effect, and this is such a cheap one. It's worth it. Go for it. Next, we've got Arcane Signet, 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, blue or red. This is a 2 mana untapped mana rock that makes both of our colors. Of course we're running this. It's an auto include. Izzet Signet is another one. 2 generic for an artifact that taps for a blue and a red, but we have to pay a mana into it. So we're tapping 2 mana sources, whatever we're getting this mana from, and the Signet itself to get 2 mana, and that's pretty good. It fixes our mana, sets us up. 2 mana untapped rock. Love it. Next, we've got Magda. Magda, every turn, it's likely to make us a tapped treasure token. So not very fast acceleration, but a little bit of acceleration, and we can turn those treasures into dragons as well if we need to. Next, we've got Talisman of Creativity, another 2 mana rock. Taps for colorless, but it also taps for blue or red if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. And as I often like to say, we always are. Because if you don't need colored mana, just tap this for colorless mana, it's fine. But if you need colored mana, what does it mean to need it? It means that having colored mana, tapping this for colored mana, is the difference between casting a spell or not. Which means the way to read this is, would you pay a life in order to cast an extra spell this turn? Because that's what you're doing. Because otherwise you'd just be tapping this for colorless mana. So the answer to that is, yes, I would always pay a life. In a format where I have 40 life, I would always pay a life to be able to cast an extra spell, because the more spells I cast, the better I'm probably doing in the game. So yeah, it can kill you a little sooner, but you know what else can kill you a little sooner? Not casting enough spells. Not being able to deal with your opponent's stuff. Letting them win the race just because you're worried about a little bit of damage. So yeah, I usually say that these kinds of effects, like the talismans or the pain lands, are always worth running. They're essentially an untapped source of the colors of mana you need. And again, if you just don't need colored mana, you don't have to tap it for that. Great. We've seen the Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind. It's a manalith that makes red. Dragon's Horde is a manalith on its own. The Dragonstorm Globe is a manalith. It also puts counters on our dragons. Furdok Core is a manalith. Lapis Orb of Dragonkind is a manalith that's just blue. All of these are 3 mana rocks that make mana. That's great. Patron of the Arts enters and dies and makes a treasure. Swashbuckler Extraordinaire enters and makes a treasure. Atsushi dies and makes 3 treasures. Nimbleclaw Adept can be used to untap our 2 other permanents, which means every turn we tap this, we're able to untap 2 lands or other, mana producing permanents, and we can make more mana with it. and Ganax gives us a treasure every time it or any other dragon we control enters. Cool. That is our acceleration section, and we've already talked about our one discount card, Dragon Speaker Shaman, and how I don't like to run discounts, but it's a 2-mana discount, and so it's pretty worthy for this deck, especially because dragons are a creature type that is pretty big, so that 2-mana discount is effective for many of our dragons, if not all of them, and brings them down by quite a bit. So yeah, any turn you're able to cast multiple spells feels good. If those multiple spells are big flying creatures, it feels even better. So that is our discount section. Next is our interaction section, which as usual I've just tagged as removal. Of course, we're running the classic, it's Lightning Bolt. A single red gives us an instant that does 3 damage to any target. This is burn to our opponent's faces. This will kill creatures or planeswalkers. We can hit our own battle, our own Invasion of Tarkir with this, and reduce it from 5 defense to 2 right away. So Lightning Bolt, it's been in here in the game since Alpha, and it's still worth playing. Even in Commander, 3 damage just kills things. That's good. We've seen Dragon Tempest lets us do lets our dragons do damage to a creature or player, which is to say any target, equal to the number of dragons we control when they enter. Evasion of Tarkir does at least 2 damage when it enters, maybe more if we've got dragons we can reveal from our hand. Molten Exhale is 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker. Imprisoned in the Moon is an aura for 2 and a blue that says enchant creature, land, or planeswalker, and that enchanted permanent is a colorless land that taps for colorless mana and loses all other card types and abilities. So Imprisoned in the Moon, I like to put in my blue decks because it's a great way to deal with commanders. You can put this on any creature, or planeswalker, or land, but usually if you have someone, if one of your opponents' commander is like a value engine that's just giving them too much all at once, or if they've got any creature that's that way, but especially their commander, Imprisoned in the Moon just turns that card into a land that taps for colorless, which is you ramping them, technically. But if they don't have a way to interact with auras or with their own lands, well then it's just going to stay that way for basically the rest of the game, especially if it is their commander that this is on. So this is a good way to shut down the most problematic creature at the table, or planeswalker. So yeah, it's just a nice inclusion in decks for this kind of reason, especially since in most of my blue decks I don't run a lot of interaction on the stack, like counterspells, simply because I don't know. I've got a lot of thoughts on counterspells. I like them when I play games, but in these decks, I'm trying to build toward a type of fun that the kind of pods that are looking for that kind of fun are just not usually looking for that sort of feel bad of a counterspell. Even though they're powerful, don't get me wrong. Imprisoned in the Moon is at least proactive because at least they've gotten their permanent into play before we turn it off and make it into a land. So yeah. We've got Spitflame, 4 damage to a creature, and we can recur it whenever a dragon comes in. Parapet Thrasher can destroy an artifact that an opponent controls when its trigger goes off. Illithid Harvester, of course, can tap down a bunch of creatures that won't untap during their controller's next untap step, and then we can humble them by making them into horrors. Scourge of Valkus, similar to our Dragon Tempest card, gives us the ability to for any of our dragons, including itself, to do damage equal to the number of dragons we control to any target once they come in. Wrathful Red Dragon lets us take damage and send it at any target that isn't a dragon when any of our dragons take it, which is pretty nice because we can, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, take Lozhan's damage and send it at one of our dragons, and if our dragon wouldn't die, it will then send it to something else. Maybe we want to do that sometimes, who knows. Then Hammerhead Tyrant lets us bounce. It turns all of our spells into bounce spells as long as the permanent being bounced, the non-land permanent being bounced, is lesser or equal mana value to the spell we're casting. Drakaseth does 4 damage to one thing and 3 damage to up to 2 other things when it attacks. And Swordcoast Serpent has the Capsizing Wave, which returns a creature to its owner's hand. Just a little unsummon. That covers our interaction section. So we've got a lot of Wrathful Red Dragon tags. There we go. The 2 Wraths in our deck. We've seen Ryusei does 4 damage to each creature without flying when it dies. And Illithid Harvester is really more of an interaction spell, but its Ceramorphosis effect is kind of board wipey. It at least shuts down a bunch of creatures, even if they're still in play as vanilla 2/2 horrors. So yeah, you can look at it both ways, and that's why I've got it tagged here. Great. That covers all of the cards in our support sections. Let's go to the supplemental categories of our game plan, starting with our payoffs. These are all cards that give us value for doing the things we were going to do anyway, and we've seen most of these. Curiosity, every time our commander does damage to an opponent, or any enchanted creature that we put this on, but usually we're putting it on Lozhan, we're going to get to draw a card. Magda lets us commit crimes and get treasures. Seize the Secrets lets us commit crimes and draw cards for cheaper, I guess. Dragon Cultist makes us a 4/4 flying dragon at the end of our turn, as long as we've done 5 or more damage, as long as one of our sources has done 5 or more damage this turn. Virtue of Knowledge lets us double our triggers, whether it's copying an activated or triggered ability, or copying our enters the battlefield triggers. And Niv lets us draw even more cards, same as Curiosity, when we do non-combat damage to an opponent, which could come from, just our commander, and it usually will. The cards we haven't seen in this section are Basilisk Collar first. Basilisk Collar is an interesting card that it's very good, but I usually struggle with how to tag it in a deck that doesn't care about specifically Death Touch and Life Gain. This is a single generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 and gives the equipped creature Death Touch and Lifelink. What this does in our deck is if we put this on Lozhan, we can then say Lozhan's damage gains us life. So that's a pretty powerful ability. But it also kills just anything. As long as Lozhan is able to target a creature with her triggered ability, with the damage that she's doing, and that creature isn't indestructible, then that creature's going to die, because her damage is Death Touch damage, so it's just going to kill anything. Basilisk Collar, in addition, will gain us the life off of that, but even if we send her damage upstairs and we burn our opponent's life totals directly, we're still gaining life off of that too. So this is just a really powerful effect that rewards us for doing all of our Lozhan stuff with instant killing any creature we hit and with life every time we do the damage. Seems fun. Also, similar to Virtue of Knowledge, we've got Harmonic Prodigy in our deck. 1 and a red. For a 1/3 human wizard with prowess, meaning whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. But it also says if a triggered ability of a shaman or another wizard we control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is great because, as you recall, Lozhan is a dragon shaman. So every time we cast an adventure or dragon spell, if Harmonic Prodigy and Lozhan are in play, Lozhan's going to trigger twice, and we're going to do twice as much damage, and we can split it up, since it's 2 different triggers. But those are not the only shamans and wizards in the deck. Niv Mizzet is a dragon wizard. If we do 3 damage from Lozhan, Niv's going to trigger twice, and we're going to draw 3 cards twice. That's 6 damage. Our Livon, that cares about us casting non-creature spells and pumps up our creatures when we do, is a shaman as well. We've got several different cards that have these types. Looks like 3 total shamans, 3 total wizards. We know that Niv and Harmonic Prodigy are both wizards. We've got 1 more wizard, and we've got 2 shamans, or 1 shaman beyond the 2 I've mentioned, one of which is our commander. But even if Harmonic Prodigy was a 2-mana 1/3 that helps out our commander only, that's still pretty good because it's doubling all the damage we're doing. Sweet. Those are our payoffs. Next we have our burn section, just to look at all the different ways we can burn things that aren't Lozhan. So Lightning Bolt can go face. I'm sorry, burn, just to be clear, this is different from interaction because burn can go to players. We're not removing players, we're burning them, just so you understand the distinction for how I use the terms in my deck text. So Lightning Bolt can go to the face, Dragon Tempest, and Dragon Tempest and Scourge of Valkus both have similar triggers. They can both go to any target. So can Evasion of Tarkir. Fire Spitter Whelp hits each opponent when we have a non-creature or dragon spell get cast. Parapet Thrasher can do 4 damage to each other opponent when one of our dragons does damage to one or more of our dragons does damage to an opponent. Thunderbreak Regent it will do 3 damage to any player that targets one of our dragons with a spell or ability. Vengeful Ancestor has creatures get goaded, and those goaded creatures do damage to their controller when they attack. Dragonhawk lets us exile some cards, and if we don't cast them or play them by the end of our turn at our end step, they turn into 2 damage to each opponent's face. Wrathful Red Dragon takes damage that any of our dragons would take, and they still do take it, but when they do take it, we do that much damage to any other target that's not a dragon, which includes players. Red Dragon does 4 damage to each opponent when it enters, and Drakaseth can take either its 4 or either of its 3 instances of damage when it attacks and send them to players. And if we want, we can do, player A, player B, player C. Hit them all. Cool. Yeah, that is our burn section. Next up is our evasion section. These are just cards that supplement the fact that most of our creatures fly. Frostcliff Siege can give some of our creatures trample, or all of them, I guess, +1/+0 and haste. And Stirring Bard can be tapped to give one of our creatures haste and menace. Both of those are pretty sweet as a supplement for our flying. That is our tiny evasion section. Next up, it's time to talk about Pump. These are all cards that make our things bigger, and we've seen them all. Dragonstorm Globe has all of our dragons enter with an extra counter on them. If we choose Teamer on Frostcliff Siege, all of our creatures have trample, haste, and +1/+0. Lozhan, whenever we cast a non-creature spell, can give power boost equal to that creature's that spell's mana value to a creature we control. Crucible of Fire makes all our dragons have a permanent giant growth. Latless can give our dragons has a fire-breathing effect that affects all of our dragons, and Stormscale Scion, for every instance of it in play, gives +1/+1 to every other dragon, including its own copies. That is our Pump section. Next, it's time to talk about protection. These are cards that are meant to protect us or our stuff. Vengeful Ancestor protects us by goading the scariest creature we don't control, so it's not going to attack us unless we're the last player. Thunderbreak Regent dissuades players from targeting our creatures, our dragons at least, because they know that they're going to get lightning bolted if they do. And we have the Swifties. Swiftfoot Boots is 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives an equipped creature hexproof and haste. Haste, as we've already seen, we have a few instances of in this deck. It can be really great for a big dragon, especially a dragon that has on damage triggers or attack triggers. But oftentimes, what we're doing with the Swiftfoot Boots is we're putting them on Lozhan, because we want Lozhan to have hexproof. Hexproof is great for a commander. You can run other effects and more expensive cards like Lightning Greaves, but I think the Swifties are pretty great and relatively inexpensive for what they do, so yeah, worth running. And that is our protection section. Next, we have a bit of recursion, in the sense that we can get Spitflame back every time we have a dragon enter. That's it. It just lets us recast this over and over, so we get more value from it each time. It's pretty good. And finally, I like to talk about the tokens generation section. These are ways to supplement all of the dragons we have, because all of these make dragons. Magda, if we sack 3 treasures, makes a 4/4 flying hasty dragon, but only as a sorcery. Dragon Cultist at the end step, as long as any of our sources have dealt 5 or more damage during that turn, we get a 4/4 flying dragon token. Latless makes 5/5 flying dragon tokens every time another non-token dragon we control enters while she's in play. And Reflections of Lityara copies any of our dragon spells when we cast them, assuming we chose dragon as it entered. And we get to keep those as long as they're not legendary, or if we choose to keep them and not the legendary creature. Usually we don't get to keep them around unless they're non-legendary, but that's okay. We still get quite a few of them over the course of the game. And that covers all of the spells in our deck. As usual, it's time to talk about our land base, starting with our basics. Of course, we're running Baldur's Gate lands. I really like to choose these lands that have, all of the Baldur's Gate lands have flavor text on them. So I like to split it up and run a bunch of different arts for both types so I can, always read the different flavor text, but that's just me. In any case, we could go a little harder on red in this balance than we did, but I like to, in my decks, look at what the optimal balance is for our basics and then sort of fudge it so that it's a little closer to the mean. That way, we're less likely to be in a situation where it's early on and we just don't have enough blue sources to, cast Sand Augury. This 2-mana spell. We want to be able to have our minority colors still be represented early enough that at the very least we can cast our commander. Of course, in this deck, our commander is 5 mana, so it's very easy to do that. But I just don't want to be hurting for the right color of mana when it's early on and we really want to cast Frostcliff Siege for 3 and get it going for maybe a creature we've already got in play or something, but we don't have any blue. So that's why we've got this balance, and it ends up working well for us. Next, we've got Coastal Peak. This is a bicycle land. That means it enters tapped, but it taps for blue or red because it is an island and a mountain inherently. It's got the basic types already. So this adds to our islands and mountains count, which will be relevant in a moment. It also has cycling for 2 generic, meaning we can pay 2 and discard it from our hand to draw a card. Something we might do late game if we just don't need any more additional mana, which is not usually a thing in this deck because we're quite mana hungry. We're a Dragon's deck. But sometimes it happens. Sometimes we're doing just fine on dragons and we really just need a little card draw rather than lands. Or if it's early game and our draws have just not been working for us, this can help us smooth them out by paying 2 and discarding it, and essentially treating it as a 2-mana spell that draws a card. That's okay. If you were to want to upgrade Coastal Peak, I would suggest Shockland. Steam Vents. Steam Vents is the Shockland in these colors. It doesn't have the cycling effect, but it does have the basic types, and it could come in untapped. It's just a lot more expensive. Next, we've got Sulphur Falls. This is a check land. It taps for blue or red, and it comes in tapped unless we control an island or a mountain, which does not say basic. So even though we have 18 basics, we've also got Coastal Peak, which is an island and a mountain. So as long as this is in play, we don't need any basics in play for Sulphur Falls to come in untapped. I like to say that the check lands belong in any deck that, or at least a 2 or 3 color deck, that has at least 18 sources, 18 lands that could make it come in untapped, because it's just a strong land if it comes in as an untapped duel. A tapped duel is also fine, of course, but in this deck, we're running 20 lands that can make this come in as an untapped duel, and that's great. If you don't want to upgrade this, don't worry about it, because I normally say the check lands upgrade into slow lands. Slow lands are inexpensive now, at least the enemy colored colors. At time of recording, enemy colored lands, I should say, because at time of recording, Secrets of Strixhaven came out just a few months ago, so the Izzet slow land, which is... I will remember it. Stormcarved Coast, there you go. It's inexpensive again, so thanks to that. And probably in a couple of months, when we get Reality Fracture, we're going to get the allied color ones as well. So hopefully those sets are going to be purchased enough, and therefore there's going to be more supply, that we're going to be able to have more slow lands in play, or in the card pool for people buying, so they're cheap. But in any case, because of that, Sulphur Falls is worth running, and so I suggest it. Next, we've got Restless Spire. Restless Spire thematically does not fit this deck, but I don't care because it's a creature land, and creature lands are fun. It's also pretty inexpensive as a tapped duel. Tapped duels are just fine to put in your deck, especially if they do something else, and Restless Spire does. It lets us pay a blue and a red, and until end of turn, it becomes a 2/1 blue and red elemental with the ability, during our turn, it has first strike, it is still a land, and when it attacks, we scry 1. So is this coming up that often? Not really. But a surprise blocker that an opponent may not see coming, even if we are chump blocking with it, since it's just a 2/1 and it only has first strike on our turn. Or sometimes we're able to attack with this, because an opponent's all tapped down, maybe thanks to our Illithid Harvester. And we get a free extra 2 damage. I guess it's not free since we're having to activate it, but we get a little extra damage and a free scry on top of that. Yeah, this can just be a fun card if we're putting dual lands in that can come in tapped. A creature land's a fun one to do, so yeah, there's Restless Spire. Next, we're running both filter lands in our colors. Ferris Lake, if we pay a mana into it and tap it, we get both of our colors. So this is just Izzet Signet as a land, and that's already good. We also have Cascade Bluffs, which can tap for colorless mana on its own, but if we pay a blue or a red into it and tap it, it can filter that into double blue, double red, or one of each. So a very strong land, but note, if you don't already have colored mana, then Cascade Bluffs can't make colored mana. You need blue or red mana in order to tap it for blue, red, or both. Otherwise, you can only make colorless mana with it. However, Ferris Lake, you can put any kind of mana into it and it'll make it into colored mana. So both of these cards have a place in our deck, solid ways for us to find our colors. We're running all 4 of these fixing lands that you often see in my deck text, if you've seen my deck text before. Command Tower has the same text as Arcane Signet. Untapped land, tapped for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. It's great, it's an untapped dual land. We would run this if it was a tapped duel, because we are. It's a Path of Ancestry. This is a tap land that has the same text as Command Tower, makes red or blue for us, but it also says whenever we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. This is awesome. We have multiple shamans in this deck, and a whole lot of dragons in this deck, so any of those, if we use Path of Ancestry's mana to cast them, we get a scry off of it. As well as, Lozhan shares types with herself, so if we cast her with Path of Ancestry's mana, we're going to get a scry from that. Sweet. Next, we've got Myriad Landscape. This is a tap land that taps for colorless mana, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for 2 basic land cards that share a land type, meaning we can find 2 of our basic plains, 2 of our basic mountains, or 2 of our basic islands. Then we put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So this comes in tapped, the lands it finds come in tapped, and we have to pay to crack it. So it's a little slow, but it is 1 land drop that we turn into 2 lands in play, both of which make colored mana, and probably the color we most need to shore up. So yeah, Myriad Landscape is acceleration in our land base, albeit slow acceleration, and that's fine. Similar is Temple of the False God. This is an untapped land that just taps for colorless, but we can't activate it unless we control at least 4 other lands, which is to say 5 or more lands, including itself. So even though this doesn't accelerate us early game, it does accelerate us a little bit. Actually, it accelerates us pretty well, just not early game. I don't know why I'm saying it that way. Jumping from making 4 mana to making 6 by having this be our 5th land drop is pretty great. And in a deck that has a lot of expensive dragons, tapping a land for 2 mana works for me. Yeah, the fact that if this is in our opening hand and we maybe don't have any other mana sources or only like, I don't know, Cascade Bluffs or something, probably worth mulliganing, simply because this is not going to do anything for us land-wise until we have 4 other lands in play. But if we get it a little later, it's still helping us accelerate, and it's totally fine for the power level of decks that I build for this channel, including this one. Next, we've got Shivan Reef. It's a pain land. I was talking about pain lands earlier when I was talking about our Talisman of Creativity. This is the same text as it. Taps for colorless, or a blue or red if we let it do a damage to us. Everything I said about the Talisman is true here too, but it's in our land base, so it's even better. Great. Frostboil Snarl is next. This is a reveal land. It taps for blue or red, and as it enters, if we reveal an island or mountain from our hand, it comes in untapped. Otherwise, it comes in tapped. So it's not quite as good as our Sulphur Falls check land, but it's along those same lines. And we've got a lot of card draw in this deck, so it's not impossible for us to get this in as an untapped duel, because maybe we've got an island or a mountain or one of our dual typed lands, our Tango land or our Bicycle land in hand. But if we have to play this as a tapped duel, that's totally fine. And if you wanted to upgrade this, I would suggest River Pyre Verge. It's another check-ish style land, but it always comes in untapped and always makes at least 1 color of mana. Unfortunately, the Verges are currently in Standard, so they're seeing a lot of play, so they're a lot more expensive. But if you've got one, or you're willing to drop the money, that would be a great upgrade for this Snarl. We've also got Temple of Epiphany. It's a scry land, comes in tapped. When it does, we scry 1, and it makes both our colors when it untaps. Perfect. These are perennially reprinted, these temples. They are beautiful, they are effective, they help us out, they give us scrying, they make us mana. Yeah, they're just cheap enough to put in your deck at all times. And if you were to want to upgrade it, Thundering Falls is a Surveil land that has both basic types and surveils rather than scries when it comes in. And those cards are being played in every format they're legal in, so pretty expensive as well. And I mentioned slow lands. I mentioned the Stormcarved Coast. Here it is. It's a land that taps for blue or red and enters tapped unless we control 2 or more other lands of any type. As long as this isn't our first or second land, this is an untapped duel. Great, works excellently in a commander deck, so you should run it. And in a similar kind of mechanic, we have Scorched Geyser. It's a Tango land. It comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So we do have 18 basics in our library, which is more than a sixth of our library. So this is not quite as good as the slow land that comes in untapped if we control 2 or more other lands of any type. This requires them to be basic, but that's okay. It's not unlikely for us to get basic lands. In addition, this is dual typed. It's the island and mountain types, so it inherently taps for blue or red, which means it can help us with our Frostboil Snarl or our Sulphur Falls check land. So yeah, nice benefit there. Oh, and I guess I should say, yeah, if you want to upgrade to a shock land, Scorched Geyser is a good one to upgrade to it. Last, we've got our lands in our utility section. So here's Demolition Field. The kind of decks I build for this channel are of a power level that is usually desired by pods that tend not to want their lands destroyed. And that's fair. Not everyone is looking for that experience in Magic, especially in a casual format like Commander. It doesn't have to just be mass land denial for you not to want it. You can just want not to have your stuff blown up, you know, and to lose out on the ability to tap for mana. The problem is, Magic has a lot of lands in it, and some of the non-basics that they've printed are problematic for you. For example, a Rogue's Passage in a deck that is a Voltron deck makes that Voltron commander unblockable, and that's dangerous for you. Or I have a friend who likes to run Glacial Chasm, so if you have a deck that's based around doing damage like ours is, that shuts off your deck's ability to do what it does. Anything that unduly, or significantly I should say, empowers someone else's game plan or depowers ours is a threat to us, and threats in Magic get answered. Demolition Field is my suggestion for that, even for decks of this power level played at pods that don't want to see their lands get blown up. It is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and then that opponent gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped. And we do too. We get to replace our Demolition Field, they get to replace the thing we blew up. Both of us still have a land in play, assuming we had basics left in our libraries, and they are not being denied mana because we didn't use this to, just blow up a dual land that they had a wild growth on, which would have given them extra mana. Because we're not trying to be a jerk with this, we're trying to turn off threats to ourselves, like a Gaia's Cradle or something. Obviously, you use this however you like. I'm just telling you the philosophy why it's in this deck as a one-of answer to problematic lands in a 100-card deck. And if you take that philosophy, the kind of tables that don't want to see their lands get blown up are usually not going to have a problem with losing a non-basic, since you spent 2 mana on it and found them a basic land that they get untapped. Next up is Edgewall Inn. Fun name for this because it's a little bit of an edge case for the uses in our deck. It's a tap land that as it enters we choose a color and it taps for mana of that color, so we can fix our mana with it. But we can also pay 3, tap and sack it to return a card that has an adventure from our graveyard to our hand. A little bit of recursion in our land base for only 4 different cards, or maybe it's 5, you'll see in a moment, to be able to get those cards back and be able to use them again. Pretty sweet to be able to cast our one of our adventure creatures and have it be killed and then use our Edgewall Inn to get it back, cast the adventure again and get the creature again as well, and get Lozhan triggers each of those times. It's nice. Lindblom, Industrial Regency, is our 5th adventure card in the deck. It's in our land base. Lindblom itself is a town land, not relevant in this deck, that taps for red and comes untapped. So just another red source, sure. But if we want, prior to that, we can cast Mage Siege, an instant that makes a black mage token, which is a 0/1 black wizard with whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Something that happens plenty in our deck, a little bit of extra burn, and we've cast an adventure, which is 3 generic, which means that's a lightning bolt that Lozhan is sending to some target that isn't a commander. And then once we've done that, this card's in exile, and we can play the land half of it, Lindblom, from exile as our land drop on any turn where we haven't made our land drop yet. Sweet. Next we've got Maelstrom of the Spirit Dragon. A land that taps for colorless, comes in untapped, or we can tap it for 1 mana of any color to spend on dragon and omen spells. Now I didn't include any omens in this deck because their formatting looks similar to an adventure, and I didn't want anyone to be confused. But there are sweet omen dragons in Tarkir Dragonstorm, so worth putting in the deck if you want to be a little vigilant about that. But in any case, this taps for colorless for anything that isn't a dragon, and any color for anything that is a dragon. It doesn't even say dragon creature. Not that Fur.Core needs colored mana, but there you go. And we can pay for, tap, and sack this land to tutor up a dragon card. Again, it could be Fur.Core. Search your library for a dragon, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. I don't usually run tutors in my deck, but this is built onto a land, so why not? Non-land tutors, that is. Rogue's Passage, I mentioned a minute ago. It's an untapped land, taps for colorless, or we can pay for and tap it and make one of our creatures unblockable this turn, which is a great way to sneak in some damage or protect our creatures from blockers and the possibility of trading in combat, since our commander is a 4/2, which is, in my opinion, like the most awkward power and toughness combination in Magic. We don't want Lozhan to be dying, but we do want her to be able to do some damage, and if we don't need our mana for other things, we've got Rogue's Passage to help us get in with Lozhan or any of our other creatures that we want to attack with. But notably, Rogue's Passage doesn't say target creature you control. So we can use this 2 other ways. We can use it politically or strategically. Politically looks like this. we notice that an opponent has a huge creature and we want them to attack a different opponent. So we say to opponent A, hey, you've got that big creature. I know you want to send it at opponent B, but you don't want them to block. What if we use our Rogue's Passage to make your creature unblockable? And then you leave us alone for a turn cycle or two in repayment. A lot of players will say, yeah, that sounds great, because they think we're using mana to benefit them, which we are. And they'll say, sure, activate your Rogue's Passage. And we will say, no, 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 no. You have to attack with your creature first. Because if you don't, we activate the Rogue's Passage, and then you can choose to attack us, and we can't block. We don't want you to betray us that way. And they'll say, that's fair. You are making a deal. We will show some good faith. I will declare attacks with this creature. And then we say, great, we are honorable. We will activate our Rogue's Passage and make your creature unblockable. And opponent B, who's getting attacked, is like, you guys are ganging up on me. And we say, well, that's just how magic goes sometimes. But the reason this is beneficial to us is not just because we've made a deal with someone and maybe made a little bit of friendship, or at the very least gotten their promise to not bother us for a turn cycle or two, but also we used mana and they think that we used it to help them out. But we used it to help us out. And in the process, we got them to use their attack phase, their combat phase, and their creature to help us. Because what's happening there is we're doing damage to opponent B using their creature by having them attack with that creature. It's costing us 5 mana, 4 plus the opportunity cost of activating Rogue's Passage. But that opponent who attacked, who we made their creature unblockable, now has a creature that, if it didn't have vigilance, is tapped and so can't block us, and definitely isn't threatening us. Even if they would have said, I'm not going to make the deal with you to leave you alone, they might still make the deal to attack someone else, which means they're still not attacking us with it. So all of this is us spending mana and their resources to benefit us, since opponent B is our opponent as well. We want them to lose too. It seems like opponent A is being helped, and technically they are, but it's also costing them an attack that they might not have made. So this political way of using Rogue's Passage can be really powerful. But there's also the strategic way, which is exactly the same as the political way, but you don't make a deal. Let's say opponent B is going to attack opponent C, and they go ahead and make their attacks. And opponent C is like, all right, I'm about to block. And we say, no, before blocks, we activate a Rogue's Passage, and we make their big creature unblockable. And then opponent B is like, what? Why are you doing that? And we say, because we want you to do damage with your big creature. And they go, thanks for helping out. And we say, you're welcome, because we helped ourselves, but we also helped them technically. And opponent C is like, what the heck? Why are we teaming up? And we say, we're not teaming up. You're our opponent as well. So it's also a fun moment. A lot of the times at, tables of the power level that these decks fit in, sometimes players just don't interact with other players while those other players are in combat. Like if opponents A and B are, one's attacking the other, you don't usually see opponent C jump in and do something as well. But doing that is possible in Magic, and it's fun. It makes a moment that is usually like splashy, and so it's memorable. So people enjoy that. Except maybe the person who's getting attacked. Anyway, Rogue's Passage has a lot of uses. It is expensive to activate, but in a deck like ours, sometimes we get stuck on mana a little bit, and we have enough, but not quite enough to cast all the spells we want to, so we have to sort of make a decision, and we're left with some extra mana. Rogue's Passage can be a good use for that. Last, we have Spinerock Knoll. This is a land that enters tapped, and taps for red, but it has Hideaway 4. When it enters, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, and we exile one of them face down under the knoll. And then we put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And then we can pay a red and tap the knoll when we have an opponent who was dealt 7 or more damage during the turn that we're activating this. And when we do that, we get to play that exiled card without paying its mana cost. So that's sweet. It's playing the exiled card, which is casting a spell, if it's a spell, of course. And we're not paying its mana cost, but Lozhan doesn't require us to pay mana. She only requires us to cast Adventurers or Dragons. So if we are playing an exiled card from under Spinerock Knoll without paying its mana cost, and it is a Dragon or an Adventure card, it's still going to trigger Lozhan. And all it requires, in order for us to spend 2 mana on this, which is red and the opportunity cost of the Spinerock Knoll, is that one of our opponents was dealt 7 or more damage. That does not say by us. It does not say combat damage either, so if we have Lozhan triggers doing the damage, then that can get us up there, and we've got the extra mana, so we can activate Spinerock Knoll and get that other card for free. But if opponent A attacks opponent B, and opponent B takes 7 damage, we can activate the Spinerock Knoll in response, and that's cool. And once we've done that, that card is gone, it's cast, but the Knoll sticks around as a red source for us, which is our primary color in the deck, and that seems good. Also, the Spinerock Knoll looks like a sleeping dragon. Kind of neat for that. Maybe we should let it lie. Anyway, that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Baldur's Gate Commander decks every Monday until I've done them all, so let me know in the comments which commander or background you're most excited to see. Great, thanks for watching everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Consider becoming a member of this channel on YouTube, or joining my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic. And remember, most of all, that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.